An arrogant CEO goes undercover to test his employees, but when only the janitor treats him with kindness, the CEO's shocking decision changes everything. The corporate headquarters of Sinclair Industries bustled with energy, employees rushing between meetings, phones ringing, deals being made. But amidst all the chaos, no one paid attention to the new janitor pushing a mop down the hallway. No one except Walter. Walter had been a janitor in this company for over 20 years. He had seen executives come and go, watched promotions handed out, and quietly observed the way power shifted in the company. Unlike most, he never judged people by their titles, only by their character. And right now, he was watching the new janitor struggle with the mop. Walter chuckled, stepping forward. "Son, looks like that mop's winning the fight." The younger janitor sighed, wiping sweat off his forehead. "Yeah, guess I'm not too good at this." Walter grabbed another mop and handed it over. "Here, let me show you a trick." The young janitor watched closely as Walter demonstrated, his movements effortless. "It ain't just about pushing it around, it's about control, like dancing. You let the mop do the work, not your back." The young janitor gave it another try, this time moving smoother. "Hey, that actually works." Walter smiled. "Told you." He patted his shoulder. "You'll get the hang of it. And don't let these fancy suits make you feel small. Ain't a single one of them that could keep this place running without folks like us." The young janitor's eyes flickered with something unreadable. "Yeah, I think I'm starting to see that." What Walter didn't know, what no one knew, was that the struggling janitor wasn't just some new hire. He was Ethan Sinclair, the owner of Sinclair Industries. And by the end of the week, he would make a decision that left the entire company stunned. Ethan Sinclair, CEO of Sinclair Industries, had spent the last week disguised as a janitor, and what he had seen so far, it disgusted him. Employees who had once greeted him with fake smiles now ignored him. Some even sneered as they brushed past. The managers, who usually showered him with praise, barely acknowledged his presence. Worse, he had watched as junior employees were overworked and underappreciated, while higher-ups took credit for their work. The only person who had treated him like an actual human being? Walter. The old janitor had no idea who he was, yet he had been kind, patient, and full of wisdom that even Ethan, a billionaire, had never considered. And now, after everything he had witnessed, Ethan was about to make a decision that would shake the entire company. Friday afternoon. The big reveal. The Sinclair Industries boardroom was filled with its top executives. The managers, directors, and department heads all gathered for a routine weekly meeting. Then the doors swung open. Ethan walked in. But this time, he wasn't wearing a janitor's uniform. He was in a sharp, tailored suit. The room went silent. Confused glances were exchanged. Some employees who had completely ignored or mistreated him just days ago suddenly sat up straighter. Ethan took his seat at the head of the table. He adjusted his cuffs, then leaned forward. "I've spent the last week undercover as a janitor," he said, his voice calm but firm. Murmurs rippled through the room. A few managers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Ethan continued. "And what I saw was unacceptable." His piercing gaze scanned the room. "I saw employees being overworked and underappreciated. I saw managers ignoring problems, treating people like they were disposable." He paused. "And I saw how I was treated when you all thought I was just a janitor." Several faces paled. Ethan let the silence stretch before finally speaking again. One person in this entire company treated me with respect. Just one." A few executives exchanged nervous glances, as if hoping he was referring to them. Ethan leaned back. "Walter." The entire room turned to the janitor who had quietly entered behind him. Walter looked stunned, his mop still in hand. Ethan smiled. "Walter, come here." Hesitantly, Walter stepped forward, glancing around as if he had walked into the wrong room. What's going on?" Ethan stood. "You, Walter, treated me like a person when no one else did. You showed me kindness, respect, and wisdom that I don't even get from some of my highest-paid executives." He turned to the rest of the room, his voice carrying authority. "This company doesn't run because of suits sitting in meetings. It runs because of the hard-working people behind the scenes. People like Walter." Walter rubbed the back of his neck. "Well, Ethan raised a hand. "And that's why, starting today, Walter is being promoted." The entire room gasped. Ethan grinned. "Walter, how'd you like to be head of facilities?" Walter blinked. "Wait, what?" "I mean it," Ethan said. "You'll get a raise, your own team, full benefits. You've been overlooked for too long." Walter looked overwhelmed, his eyes slightly watery. I don't know what to say." Ethan smiled. "Say yes." After a long pause, Walter chuckled and shook his head. "Well, hell. Guess I can't say no to that." The room erupted into applause, some genuine, some out of fear. But Ethan wasn't done. His expression darkened as he turned back to his executives. "As for the rest of you," his voice dropped slightly, sending a chill down their spines, "expect some major changes, because after what I saw this week..." His gaze locked onto a few specific managers who had been the worst offenders. "There are some people here who won't be sitting in this room much longer." The blood drained from their faces. Ethan buttoned his suit jacket and smirked. Meeting adjourned. As he left the boardroom, Walter by his side, the rest of the company was left reeling, knowing that nothing would ever be the same again. The news spread like wildfire. Employees whispered in the hallways, emails flooded inboxes, and some of the worst managers had already begun quietly packing up their desks. No one knew exactly who would be fired next, but one thing was clear. Ethan Sinclair wasn't playing games. And Walter? He was now the most talked about man in the entire company. Monday morning. A new era. Walter adjusted his new suit jacket, still not quite used to the fit. It felt strange. Expensive fabric replacing the janitor's uniform he had worn for 2 decades. But what felt even stranger? The respect he was getting. People who had once ignored him were now greeting him in the hallways. Employees who had barely noticed his presence were now listening when he spoke. For the first time in 20 years, Walter wasn't just the janitor, he was head of facilities. Ethan walked up beside him, coffee in hand. "Getting used to it?" Walter chuckled. "I don't know, boss. Feels kind of weird not carrying a mop." Ethan grinned. "You earned this, Walter. You've been overlooked for too long." He took a sip of his coffee before glancing down the hall. "Besides, you're not just a facilities manager now." Walter raised an eyebrow. "Oh yeah? What else am I?" Ethan smirked. "You're proof that the right people deserve to be in power." Walter shook his head with a smile. "Guess that makes you proof that not all CEOs are bad." Ethan laughed. "I'll take that as a compliment." Just then, a few former managers walked by, men who had belittled Walter, who had treated him like nothing. But today they were the ones avoiding eye contact. They were the ones afraid of being dismissed. Walter watched them go, then turned to Ethan. "So, what happens next?" Ethan's smirk widened. "Now?" He looked around the office, his eyes sharp with determination. "Now we rebuild this company the right way." And as Walter stood beside him, no longer invisible, no longer overlooked, he realized something. For the first time in his life, he was exactly where he was meant to be. With the company buzzing with change, Ethan wasted no time in shaking things up. By the end of the week, 3 high-ranking managers had been let go. The same ones who had ignored employees, taken credit for others' work, and treated lower-level staff like they were disposable. The message was clear. No more corruption, no more entitlement, no more mistreatment. Walter, now settled into his new role, had his own office, something he never imagined would happen. But instead of staying behind a desk all day, he made sure to walk the halls, talking to employees, checking on the janitorial staff, and making sure no one was treated the way he once had been. One afternoon, as he was making his rounds, he spotted Ethan leaning against the balcony overlooking the company floor, deep in thought. Walter walked over. "You look like a man with a plan," Ethan smirked. "Always." Walter folded his arms. "Let me guess. You're not done making changes." Ethan chuckled. "Not even close." He turned to Walter. "I don't just want to fix this company. I want to set an example. Show other CEOs how things should be done." Walter nodded slowly. "Well, boss, you're off to a damn good start." Ethan looked out at the bustling company floor, watching employees work with a renewed sense of purpose. It wasn't perfect yet, but for the first time, things were moving in the right direction. He glanced at Walter, his expression serious. "You know, if more leaders had someone like you around, companies would be a whole lot better." Walter chuckled. "And if more CEOs were like you, I wouldn't have spent 20 years with a mop in my hands." Ethan laughed, shaking his head. "Fair point." They stood in silence for a moment, both knowing this was just the beginning. Because Sinclair Industries wasn't just under new leadership, it was under the right leadership. And this was only the start of something bigger.